Hello guys, welcome to the movie recap review. Happy watching.
Back for her party. Jen.
Now you're gonna show them teeth.
The film begins with Jennifer Hills, a novelist seeking solitude to complete her latest book. She rents a remote cabin in the Deep South, hoping for peace and inspiration. On her way, she stops at a local shop to collect the keys. Earl, the cabin's owner, hands them over and gives her directions, warning her that the cabin is hard to reach, but worth it for the view and tranquility. As Jennifer drives deeper into the countryside, the winding roads and unfamiliar terrain leave her increasingly disoriented. She decides to stop at a gas station to refuel and ask for more precise directions. There, she encounters three workers, Andy, Stanley, and Johnny, who loiter outside. The men attempt to flirt with her, but Jennifer, focused and uninterested, brushes them off. When she asks for help with the route to her cabin, Johnny, clearly intrigued by her, tries to make a move. However, his awkward attempt backfires when Jennifer inadvertently causes him to spill a bucket of fluid, prompting laughter from Andy and Stanley. Embarrassed, Johnny glares after her as she drives away. After a long journey, Jennifer finally reaches the secluded, slightly eerie cabin that will be her home for the next several months. She wastes no time unpacking and sets to work on her novel. The following day, while relaxing by the lake, Jennifer hears faint noises from the woods. Assuming they're just crows, she dismisses them and continues writing on the cabin's porch. However, the tranquility is interrupted again when she hears strange sounds coming from the shed nearby. The next morning, Jennifer goes for a run and finds an abandoned house. Curious, she explores it but doesn't find anything interesting and moves on with her day. Back at the cabin, she tries to take a bath but discovers the water is brown and the toilet is clogged. Frustrated, she calls a plumber named Matthew. Things get worse when she drops her phone in the toilet and has to dry it with a hairdryer. When Matthew arrives, Jennifer notices he has a speech problem and seems shy. After he fixes the bathroom, she gives him a quick kiss on the cheek as thanks. Meanwhile, in the woods, Johnny, Andy, and Stanley are killing fish for fun, while Stanley records everything with his camera. Matthew joins them and tells Johnny about Jennifer kissing him. Johnny doesn't believe it at first, but Stanley backs Matthew up. Then Stanley shows them a video he secretly recorded of Jennifer the night before. Johnny gets angry and starts talking about teaching Jennifer a lesson. That night, Jennifer hears strange noises outside again. When she opens the door, she finds a dead bird on her doorstep. She searches the area but sees no one. Returning to her laptop, she's shocked to find a selfie of Johnny and his friends on the screen. Suddenly, Johnny, Andy, Stanley, and Matthew barge into the cabin. Johnny mocks her while Stanley films everything. Matthew looks uncomfortable but doesn't stop them. Jennifer tries to scare them off by saying her boyfriend is coming, but they don't care. They make fun of her writing, throw lit matches at her, and force her to drink alcohol. Matthew cowers in the corner, unwilling to help. Johnny then demands Jennifer show him her teeth. Confused and scared, she hesitates until he threatens her with a bat, forcing her to obey. Johnny escalates the situation by pulling out a gun and shoving it into Jennifer's mouth while the others laugh. When he gets close again, Jennifer seizes her chance, smashing a bottle against his knee. She grabs a can of pepper spray and uses it on Stanley before dashing out of the cabin and into the woods. Terrified and desperate, she eventually stumbles upon the town sheriff and Earl, the cabin's owner. In tears, she recounts the assault and begs for their help. The sheriff tells Earl to return home and offers to escort Jennifer back to the cabin to investigate. When they arrive, the cabin appears empty. While looking around, the sheriff notices a weed joint and a broken bottle, using them as reasons to accuse Jennifer of lying. He questions her credibility, claiming she has no right to accuse good men he's known since childhood. Things take a darker turn when the sheriff uses the opportunity to grope Jennifer under the guise of a body search. Before the situation escalates further, Johnny and his friends return, interrupting them. Instead of helping Jennifer, the sheriff joins the men. He begins assaulting her while the others watch. When Jennifer tries to fight back, Johnny puts her in a chokehold, ripping off her pants and forcing Matthew to undress. Initially resistant, Matthew eventually complies out of fear. The men then pin Jennifer down, commanding Matthew to assault her while Stanley films everything. Matthew hesitates, visibly sickened, but follows through under pressure. In the middle of the horrific ordeal, the sheriff casually answers a phone call from his young daughter, showing no remorse. Afterward, Matthew vomits, overwhelmed by guilt and disgust. Jennifer, battered and broken, summons the last of her strength to flee into the woods. Despite her efforts, she runs into the group again, where her suffering continues. Andy drags Jennifer to a puddle and repeatedly submerges her head, leaving her gasping and weakened. As she lies helpless on the ground, the sheriff removes his pants and assaults her, ignoring her desperate cries for mercy. The other men take turns assaulting Jennifer, while Stanley records everything with his camera. When Jennifer regains consciousness, she is covered in dirt and barely able to move. Summoning her remaining strength, she stumbles toward a bridge over a river. The men follow her casually, believing she has nowhere to go. As the sheriff prepares to shoot her to cover their crime, Jennifer suddenly plunges into the water and vanishes. The men wait for her to surface, but she doesn't. They search the river, hoping her body will appear, but find nothing. The sheriff, now panicking, orders the group to dispose of Jennifer's car and belongings and to burn the tape Stanley recorded. Later, the sheriff returns home to his wife and daughter, acting as though nothing happened. He spends the evening with his family, showing no signs of remorse for his actions. The following day, he returns the cabin keys to Earl, the owner, claiming Jennifer was a problematic alcoholic who left abruptly. In the days that follow, the group resumes their lives as if nothing happened. However, Matthew is consumed with guilt, often imagining Jennifer's ghost haunting him as he sits alone in the woods. A month later, the sheriff receives a phone call from Earl, who mentions a woman named Barbara asking about Jennifer's whereabouts, since she hasn't been seen in weeks. Meanwhile, Stanley rushes to the group in a panic, revealing that his handy cam, which contains the recording of their crime, has been stolen. Stanley admits he never burned the tape, despite being told to. Furious, Johnny attacks Stanley, but Andy intervenes to calm him down. That evening, while Johnny is watching TV alone, he hears a thud at his door. When he opens it, he finds a dead bird on the doorstep. Confused, he retreats inside, only to hear another thud moments later. Irritated and suspicious, he grabs his gun. When he hears yet another sound and opens the door, he finds one of Jennifer's sandals lying on the step. Furious and unnerved, he runs toward the rustling bushes across the yard, but finds nothing. The next day, the sheriff returns home to discover that someone has mailed his wife a tape. To his horror, it's the recording of Jennifer's assault. Panicked and enraged, he heads straight to Johnny's place to confront the group. The sheriff lashes out, accusing the men, especially Stanley, of playing a sick prank on him. But Johnny quickly points the finger at Matthew as he's nowhere to be found. Later that day, the sheriff goes hunting with Earl. As they sit down to rest, the sheriff unexpectedly shoots and kills Earl, eliminating him as a loose end since Earl had seen him take Jennifer back to the cabin that night. Meanwhile, a guilt-ridden Matthew wakes up in the abandoned cabin Jennifer had explored earlier. He's shocked to find Jennifer sitting calmly on the couch. Relieved that she's alive, he approaches her, sobbing and apologizing for what happened. But Jennifer doesn't forgive him. She pulls out a rope and begins choking him, leaving him to face the consequences of his betrayal. On the same day, Stanley and Andy venture into the woods, searching for Matthew. They hear faint music playing, which leads them to the abandoned house. From the state of the place, it's clear someone has been living there. While Stanley wanders alone, he comes face to face with Jennifer. As he approaches her, he steps into a bear trap and screams in agony. Hearing his cries, Andy rushes to help, only to be knocked unconscious by Jennifer. Sometime later, Stanley wakes up tied to a tree stump, disoriented and terrified. Jennifer, cold and methodical, begins videotaping him. She force-feeds him a dead rat, forcing him to gag. Then, with calculated precision, she drives hooks through his eyelids and ties the hooks to the stump, forcing him to keep his eyes open. Jennifer smears the insides of a fish all over Stanley's face, the stench attracting a swarm of crows. As the birds descend, they peck mercilessly at his face, eventually tearing out his eyes. Meanwhile, Andy wakes up to find himself tied to wooden planks suspended over a bathtub filled with rising water. Jennifer enters, emotionless, and begins dunking his head into the water, ignoring his frantic pleas for mercy. To increase his suffering, she pours an acidic substance into the tub. She removes one of the planks beneath him, forcing Andy to hold himself up to avoid falling into the acid. Exhaustion sets in, and when he can no longer support himself, he repeatedly sinks into the acidic water until he drowns in agony. Jennifer's next target is Johnny, whom she surprises at the gas station, knocking him unconscious with a wrench. He wakes up tied and naked, with a horse bit painfully pulling at his mouth. Jennifer yanks on the bridle, forcing his head back, and begins pulling out his teeth one by one, reveling in his fear as he sobs and urinates on himself. Once she's removed his teeth, she takes the bridle off and shoves a gun into his mouth. Johnny, arrogant even now, laughs nervously until Jennifer pulls out a pair of shears. Without hesitation, she castrates him, shoving the severed part into his mouth. Johnny bleeds out in utter horror, his death as gruesome as his crimes. Elsewhere in town, the sheriff receives a cheerful phone call from his daughter, who excitedly tells him that her new teacher is coming for a visit. When the phone is handed to the teacher, the sheriff is shocked to hear Jennifer's voice. Calm and composed, she lets him know that she's not done yet, as her final act of vengeance is only beginning. The sheriff frantically races home after hearing Jennifer's voice, his panic escalating when he discovers his daughter is gone. Jennifer invited her to hang out, sending him into a frenzy. He searches desperately and ends up at an empty playground, calling out for his daughter to no avail. As he re-enters his car, Jennifer ambushes him from behind, knocking him unconscious. When the sheriff wakes, he's horrified to find himself inside the cabin, tied down with a shotgun forcibly inserted into his body. Jennifer stands before him, calm and cold, mocking his hypocrisy and asking how he could live with himself after assaulting a woman. To further his torment, she pushes the barrel deeper, causing him to writhe in pain. She then ties a string to the shotgun's trigger, fastening the other end to the wrist of an unconscious Matthew, who sits slumped across the room. Jennifer explains that if Matthew moves, the trigger will be pulled. The sheriff pleads desperately for his life, but Jennifer remains unmoved. She taunts him one final time about his daughter, then leaves the cabin. Moments later, Matthew stirs awake, groggy and unaware of the deadly setup. The sheriff shouts warnings, but it's too late. Matthew moves his arm, pulling the trigger. The shotgun fires, killing both men instantly.
And that's the end of the story. I hope you liked it. Comment down below what movies do you like us to recap next. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Until next time.